Hello, everyone. This is John Worley, and I am the commercial transportation underwriter here at Chris-Leef. I handle garage risks as well as auto transportation. I just want to first I'm just kind of like go over what our goal here today is, and that is to gain more knowledge about garage liability, have better understanding of the coverages, and what to look for in these risks. Now, how are we going to do that? We're going to focus on these 5 areas right here: garage liability, the different symbols, physical damage coverage, what to look for in the risks, and frequently asked questions that we receive all the time. Now, garage liability. Now, this gets to be confusing for people. They confuse garage liability with garage keepers legal liability, but with garage liability, simply, it's a combination of GL and auto. You have a premises exposure and an auto exposure on one form. As you're seeing right here on the screen, this deck page will show you the layout of the liability for the auto and for the GL. This package product enables us to cover the insured's entire risk, for example, a dealership. Who needs this coverage? Just to give an example of a dealership, we said a dealership, but who else could use this coverage? The big thing is to ask yourself, is there an auto exposure? If the answer is yes, then the insured needs garage liability, not simply just a general liability policy. The big thing to know is the 3 C's. If the auto is in the care, custody, and control of the insured, then garage liability coverage is needed. A dealer, they have a premises exposure, if someone slips and falls looking around the lot. But then that auto exposure comes up when somebody's test driving the vehicle and gets into an accident. That's when that auto side would come into play. Now, these are the differences. You'll see the different types of risks between a garage liability and general liability. They look similar, but they're not. The big thing that, again, is the big 3 C's. Is the vehicle in the care, custody, and control of the insured. Like with valet parking, there you see the auto exposure. Like self-parking, sounds very similar, but it is not, because that vehicle is not transferred to the care, custody, and control of the insured. That auto exposure is the number one thing to know. Now I want to go over some more different risks that do fall under the garage liability. First, there's the dealer. If the insured has a dealer's license and is selling vehicles operational for road use, then it is a dealer. I know there sometimes we'll run into risks that they have a little service shop, but then they will sell 4 or 5 vehicles a year. The state still requires them to carry or to have a dealer tag, which means they are a dealer, and that's how they will be rated as well. Now, service and repair. This can be mobile or this can be a physical location. We have a lot of mobile operations anymore, especially after the pandemic. This is something we will write. We have multiple carriers that will write these. Even getting into the mobile repair of farming equipment. We don't show any of that here, but that is something that we're seeing a lot of. So definitely always ask, because we're seeing a lot of this after the pandemic. Now, if the insured is doing tire sales, this is a big one. Without installation, then we can probably write that on a regular GL policy. We wouldn't need the garage liability to write it on a garage liability policy, but it's the with or without installation. Without it, we can write that on a GL policy. Just go over the different kinds of dealers, like it shows up here. There's the non-franchise dealers, there's the classic dealers, heavy trucks. We see a lot of those, especially more rural areas. We see a lot of those. Motorcycles, this is one, but I will say this is something that has changed here just this month. This has become a harder class to write, and you're going to see that everywhere because our main dealer, especially our main carrier, especially in Kansas Colony, is required that they will only write Harley dealerships and service. I might have one other carrier for you, but this is a harder one now. So definitely come directly to me with questions about motorcycle dealers and repair shops. Different types of repair shops, body and paint, oil lube service. Those are definitely the big ones. Now, if the insured is doing both dealer ops and service repair, it'll be written for the higher exposure, but in Kansas, it will always be written as a dealer. This is what the carrier requires. That it is the higher risk, it's the higher exposure, so that we will always write it under the dealer. All right. Now I just want to go into some optional coverages. Now, there's uninsured motorists and underinsured motorists. In Kansas, I mean, there's three options with this. You can decline coverage, you can accept at the bodily injury limits, you can reject at the bodily injury limits, and then choose a lower limit. Now, in Kansas, you can accept and reject, but we always need this coverage to be on there. So UMIM, it does everything that liability does. If an accident were to occur and the individual who is at fault did not have insurance, UIM would essentially act as a liability coverage for those cases. The insured's driving or has a vehicle out on a test drive, they're hit by a vehicle, no coverage, which happens more than you would like. That is what this coverage is for. So for Kansas, property damage is not covered under UIM. However, in Missouri, property damage is optional. The next coverage would be PIP coverage, or personal injury protection coverage. This is a no-fault coverage, mandatory in Kansas at a $4,500 limit. And then there's auto med pay, typically anywhere from $500 to $5,000 limit. 5,000 is usually what we're writing at. Goes to other people in the car. This is also considered a no-fault coverage. However, typically seen with premises med pay. For example, a person is walking around the dealership and trips and falls. Did they trip over their own feet? Was there a crack in the sidewalk? Unclear, so premises med pay would apply there. Now, these are the different symbols. We don't see these as much as you used to directly on the declaration page, but going over them, there's the any auto, the owned autos only. Typically, the liability, it's going to be symbol 21 and 22. That's what's going to be written on the policy there. Then you're going to see the different symbols, like symbol 25 for PIP, symbol 26 for UIM, and then symbols 30 and 31 are both used for physical damage coverage. Symbol 30 is for service repair, which is garage keepers coverage. That's the garage keepers physical damage coverage. And then symbol 31 is for the dealer physical damage coverage, or dealer open lot coverage. First, dealer's physical damage. Like I said, symbol 31, it's also called dealer's open lot, or DOL. That's usually how we refer to it. This will be split out into two things. There's going to be the comprehensive or the specific cause of loss, and then you're always going to have collision on there. The comprehensive rule of thumb is anything but collision, so it covers anything except collision with another object. Specified cause of loss, these are exactly what it sounds like. It will cover certain causes of loss. There's fire, lightning or explosion, theft, windstorm, hail or earthquake, flood, mischief or vandalism, then sinking, burning, collision, or derailment of any conveyance transporting the covered autos. You'll always have this collision, and that's going to be covers everything that comp does not, which is collision with another object or overturn. Now, some perils will be excluded on the policy depending on the area, and those typically would be wind, hail, and flood, and sometimes theft, depending on the area. Those will have higher. We'll try not to exclude them as long as there hasn't been a major loss in the past, but sometimes they will have to be excluded. I will say for this coverage, typically most carriers require 100% insurance or 100%. In Kansas, my carrier is Colony or Argonaut Midwest, and they require 100%. So that means that the DOL coverage needs to be the amount of the entire inventory for the insured. If they have $100,000 worth of vehicles, that's what we need to be insuring it for, not 65. That is something that they take quite seriously, and if a loss happened, there would be a penalty if we're not at that limit. Next, let's talk about the service physical damage, which would be garage keepers. There's legal liability and then direct primary, but legal liability is what we're going to talk about here first. This is where people get confused when we say garage liability and garage keepers legal liability. Garage liability is the GL liability for the insured. Garage keepers is the physical damage coverage. So this is the most misunderstood, just because they sound so similar. It is the physical damage coverage on customers' vehicles while they are in the care, custody, control of the insured. For example, a mechanic fixes up a car and then takes it out for a test drive and gets into an accident. The physical damage coverage for that vehicle will be covered under garage keepers. Again, this can be written on direct primary basis or legal liability. Legal liability is where the insured must be legally liable for the loss to the customer's auto for the carrier to pay out. For example, Valley Service gets into an accident while driving a customer's auto. They're legally liable for this. First, it was in their control. And did they do everything in their power to prevent this? Did they take the necessary precautions? In this situation, the Valley Service did not do everything in their power to prevent the accident from occurring, so therefore they're legally liable for the auto. Typically, wind hail is not covered as an insured. They can't be held legally liable for an act of God, so that's something that would not be covered under garage keepers when it's written on the legal liability basis. Now, direct primary is the other base that can be written on, is where a loss will be considered without regard to the insured's legal liability. It's a much broader coverage because the vehicle is covered even if the insured is not legally liable. I will tell you, my carriers right now, they will not write this coverage on new ventures, and it is something that has to be approved by them. Then I want to go over the physical damage, what we're needing. So these are the four main things that we need when we're adding physical damage coverage that really factor into the rating. We need to know the maximum amount of units that they have, the average amount of units they have, the maximum value per unit, and then the average value per unit. This allows us to rate physical damage coverage. And again, like I said earlier, we need the entire inventory to be accounted for. Now, most carriers look to this to calculate the limit, but I look at it, this is how it needs to be. The basis of the valuation are always actual cash value. I will tell you, if the insured has a website, the underwriters for the carriers will be looking at this. So this is what we're looking for. Most carriers, they require 2 years experience. That means either owning, operating, managing a dealership. Service repair work, that does not count towards that 2 years. It must be in the dealer side of garage. We need to know what type of vehicle does the insured sell. Are they heavy trucks? Is there any salvage vehicles? Some may require different types of licenses and guidelines. Most carriers prefer the owner and employees to be 21 and over and have a valid driver's license in the state the business is domiciled in. And that's a big one. I will tell you right now that they need to have an in-state license. Now, if they're where we're located in Kansas City, Kansas, Missouri, that doesn't really matter because people go over the line quite often. If they have a Florida license, a Utah license, that will definitely be an issue. Anybody that has access to the vehicles must have a valid driver's license. Violations are a big thing. So minor violations as well as major violations are subcharged. DUIs, fleeing the scene, these kind of things, that's going to 100% be a cancellation from our carriers. And do remember that all of our dealers' policies, when we go to issue these, we are running MVRs. So we will find out this information. And if for some reason we quoted it and we're about going to bind it and then we find information we didn't know about, we will not be able to write it. Now, most carriers look for a minimum of 12 to 15 vehicles to be sold annually. If they do have like a service operation and then they're only selling a few vehicles a year, that's fine. As long as they have something else going on, like another operation going on, selling a few a year finally, but it is fine. But if they are only a dealership, they need to be selling at least 12 to 15 vehicles a year. Another thing we look for is how does the insured transport vehicles to and from the lot? Are the employees doing it? Is the auction that they're buying them from doing it? Are there any contract drivers? Is there a transport company? Another big thing is the employees. All employees need to be on our applications. I know some people say, oh, they're a mechanic in the shop and they don't do this, or they're just, a clerical person. Everybody needs to be accounted for. Garage liability, this is how it's rated. It is rated for the employees, the tasks they do, and their access to the vehicles. Another one would be household members. So in Kansas, we cannot exclude anybody that has access to the vehicles, and they do include household members. Household members, as somebody that has access to the vehicles, they need to be included on their applications, even if they're not furnished a dealer tag for personal use. Now, service and repair, what to look for. And again, types of vehicles. Are they just normal cars, trucks? We talking heavy vehicles? Are they working on, we have some trailer services and things like that. These are the kind of things that we're looking for. The type of operation. Does the insured hold a proper license? Is there an auto exposure? These are the kind of things that we need to know. If it's a shop, and I know sometimes people will say they're just working on the vehicles, there's not really an auto exposure there. There is. This is where the licenses become a big thing. If they are working on a vehicle, they will have to drive that vehicle at some point. So the mechanics, all of them need to have a proper, valid in-state license. I know a big thing that comes up now is we'll have some workers that have international licenses. Those, they're not acceptable to my carriers. Are there towing operations? Are they doing repossessions for anyone? Are they for hire towing? Let's get into some of the frequently asked questions. First one is that difference between garage liability and general liability. Same thing, but with the added auto exposure. Dealer's plates versus transporter plates. Dealer's plates are what the insured throws on the back of the car when going on a test drive, or if the insured is furnished for personal use. Transporter plates are different. These can be used by anyone and slapped on any car. They can be even rated as a commercial auto policy with the tag number instead of a VIN number. Some contract drivers use these at auctions. On the application, there's two different spots about tags. There's the difference. The dealer's tags are for the dealer side of transporters. It's for the transporting side of things. We don't have to answer that transporter tag question. Do all employees need to be listed? Like I said earlier, all employees need to be listed on the application, even inactive investors and secretaries. Most times people think if they aren't dealing with the cars, there's no exposure. That's wrong. A garage policy is a combination between a GL and auto policy, so you still have a premises exposure with these employees. Does the insured need GL? Since garage is a combo between auto and GL most of the times, you don't need just a normal general liability. It is included in that garage liability. It is part of that. There are exceptions sometimes. If the insured is selling tires without installing, then there's no auto exposure. So a separate GL class code could be added on. We would rate based on the sale of the tires. Almost every garage risk has both of these additional exposures. Here's my information. My assistant, Jeanetta, she also is a great source for information. She's been doing this longer than I have, so she knows what she's talking about. Just let us know if you have any questions, any risks that you're having trouble with or getting your mind around of. Give us a call, shoot us an email. We're here for you.